Hey folks, I've been playing DayZ for a long time. Since 2019 actually, and since then I've racked up, just a few hours here and there. But in a recent DayZ experimental update, the devs have been trying out some tweaks to the central loot economy. For those unaware, this, often abbreviated to the CLE, is the system that distributes loot around the map in DayZ, deciding what spawns where and in what quantities. These CLE changes are aimed at somewhat slowing down the main game, making automatic rifles harder to come by and making it harder for you to get your hands on armour, plate carriers, press vests, and stab vests. These changes in this test only apply to Churnaris, so that is the lens with which I will be examining this. At the time of typing this section of the script up, and me recording this, I've ran 2.5 lives, all amounting to about 9 hours of playtime so far. I plan to resume the life I'm still working through tomorrow, and I did make a point of getting different spawns and using different loot routes in each life, so I can get a feel for how this new pace of progression feels across different areas. I have some praise for these changes, and some more critical feedback, as well as some suggestions on implementation and changes I'd like to see made. So let's go into a bit more depth in what these changes are and what they're hoping to achieve. Across the board, assault rifles have been made much less common. You will see significantly less police zombies with stab vests and less military zombies with plate carriers. Also, any ARs you find are likely to be lacking some parts, namely handguards and buttstocks. All the devs have said on this is the following quote: "This setup is meant to investigate gameplay that leans slightly more towards the survival side of the game." Pretty vague, but I have some ideas on the intentions of these changes, as follows. To encourage the use of more low and mid-tier weapons, namely your SMGs and shotguns, and give more time for these weapons to be useful before you find a better alternative. And encourage players to search for more dynamic events, as higher tier ARs and armor will be found more reliably in those. So, let's start with the positives. I would often joke that I could get a full kit, being an AR, a long gun, and armor, with my eyes closed on official servers. But I found these CLE changes making things I could previously pass up actually really satisfying to find. In a typical run on Churnaris, I would just run over to NWAF or a similarly sized military base, maybe pulling a shotgun along the way, grab an SKS, and use that till I stumbled across an M16 or an AK-74. On the 2 runs I've completed, I've ended up at the usual endpoint after about 3 to 4 hours of playtime: plate carrier, AKM and long gun, SVD in one case, Blaze in another. So, it definitely doesn't make that endgame loot unattainable to a casual player. I found my first life AKM in Tizzy, having found an AUG A1 prior at NWAF, and my second life AKM in the tier 4 area of NWAF. My first plate was found in Tizzy, on a zombie, and my second plate was found in NWAF, also on a zombie. It did, however, encourage me to spend more time using or preparing to use an SMG. I never found a mag for the MP5 in my first life, but I did in my second, prior to finding my AKM. And in my ongoing third life, I'm currently running a UMP45. Now, on to my criticism. I can totally get behind making armor, namely the plate carrier, harder to come by. Being able to find multiple every time you go to NWAF just felt very excessive to me. I will acknowledge that on my second life, I only saw a single plate carrier zombie at NWAF, but still, my first life where I found it at Tizzy did feel very fair to me. Tizzy is a bit of a trek, and I do feel like it's lost some of what made it unique or valuable with the addition of gas zones, so having Tizzy be a good place to go for plate Z sits well for me. I will complain about stab vests though. My first life, I didn't see a stab vest until I reached Severograd, after starting in Svetlyarsk. Especially given how weapons are balanced in DayZ, with a sizable portion of the weapons either one-hit killing or one-hit unconning you if you're unarmoured, not having access to the lowest tier of armour for most of the game can feel pretty weird, especially considering, in most cases, I would either be unable to find a stab vest before I found better armour, or by the time I did find a stab vest, I would end up finding better armour within the next area I would loot or so. Now, on to my suggestions for implementation and tweaks I'd recommend. A more general point. I'm tackling this conversation as a very experienced DayZ player. I have over 6k hours in the game, if you tally up my experimental hours and my alt account and my main account. So, of course I'll welcome anything that makes the game more challenging for me, as that's why I got into DayZ in the first place. The prospect of playing a gritty and somewhat realistic survival game Casual players or players that are more interested in the PvP aspect of the game will likely have a very different opinion on these changes than me. In terms of my armor ramblings, I do think in current official servers, stab vests are just all over the place. So, a compromise between these two extremes I would make is, no stab vests in tier 1 areas aside from dynamic events. They're fine because that's the whole point of a dynamic event. Have stab vest zombies and stabbies in general spawn on zombies and on the ground in tier 2 and up. Regarding press vests, I think they're just fine. I think they've been fine for a while. Pressies are cool. But the elephant in the room, the plates, I think plate zombies should only spawn in tier 4 zones, at dynamic events, and toxic zones. Every mid-tier fight, having someone decked in plate carriers just gets really boring, to be honest. And I will say, some of the fights I've gotten into during this experimental run, where everyone's fighting with stupid guns, has been incredibly fun. Now, onto the guns. I really like the scaling back of high tier automatics, but I think there should be an increase in their lower tier counterparts to offset. I would often come across an MP5 and want so badly to find the stuff for it, but it reached the point where I'd be finding a mag for set MP5 at about the same time I'd be finding a better gun. Either increase the amount of MP5s and UMP mags in lower tier areas, or make them much more likely to spawn with their mags. If these changes are made, I think we'd see a lot more use of these often forgotten guns as people are going through their DayZ journeys, which I feel like should be the aim of CLE changes like these. And now finally, implementation. I think if this is implemented, to make as many people happy as possible, don't entirely replace every official server with servers running this CLE. Instead, mark some official servers as hardcore and have them on a separate hive from the others. So obviously, someone can't just go on the normal servers, get a shitload of gear, and then lord over all of us plebs playing hardcore. It would give two distinct options to play DayZ. Hardcore for those seeking a bit more of a challenge, and regular for new players or people that aren't playing DayZ for that challenge and want to focus on other things like PvP. Thank you for listening to my ramblings, and I hope you have a great day. So, this little fucking goblin insisted on coming into my room while I was working on this video. Do you have anything to say? She's lucky she's cute.